So thank you so much, Heather, for joining us and making the time. I would like to start with if you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name's Heather Barr, and I work for Human Rights Watch. I'm Associate Director of the Women's Rights Division there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Of course, I know you for a very long time. So yeah, you're good on that end. So first question first, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Alaska, 16 miles outside of the capital, which is called Juneau. But Juneau is a pretty small town too. Like I think when I was growing up, Juneau was about 26,000 people. And we lived like I said, 16 miles outside of town. It's a 4-mile walk to the nearest bus stop.
Oh, wow.
So pretty rural, pretty in the woods.
Wow, yeah, and I cannot see you living there because right now where you live, it's totally opposite to Alaska, so the weather is different. Growing up, who was your inspiration? That one person or like anyone? I mean, like when I was growing up, I looked up to Simba. So who's that one person? Or Simba, the Lion King, the cartoon. Okay. But tell me about yourself. Who's your one inspiration, or who was your inspiration growing up?
Oh, that's a hard one. So I got really into music, like this was the internet, obviously. And first I liked pop music, and then I got really into sort of punk rock music. And I think I started learning about politics from listening to punk rock bands, really. So I don't know if I can think of like one particular person. I mean, one thing I think about when I think back is that like those bands were all men. There weren't really any women. Like, yeah, who were sort of part of that scene that I knew about or I connected with, because I was seriously ordering albums through the mail because that's how music was. That's how old I am. So,
it was that phase where you were like the emo kid, but also wanted to do it like the right way. So it was male, but I see you. I definitely see you with that. Well, so rock music was your doorway to politics or like political enlightening and activism. That's nice to know. What is it that you do right now at Human Rights Watch, specifically the activities that you lead?
So for almost 3 years, another colleague and I were running the Women's Rights Division because we were in between directors. And that was a really amazing opportunity to get to kind of try and keep an eye on what was happening with women's rights on the entire planet. But then we finally hired a fabulous new boss. And I went on vacation and she started. And then I was kind of thinking like, I don't really know what I'm going to work on. When my new boss comes, I don't know what she's going to want me to do. I had a bunch of ideas. Like one idea that I had was I had joined Human Rights Watch to work on Afghanistan in 2011, and I wanted to go back and do more work on Afghanistan, but I didn't know how she was going to feel about that. And then I flew back from vacation. I flew back to Pakistan to go back to work with my new boss. And we landed in Islamabad at about 1 a.m. on August 15th. And I turned on my phone and I saw that Mazar Sharif had fallen to the Taliban. And then by the time I got home, I saw that Jalalabad had fallen to the Taliban. And then I fell asleep for a few hours. And when I woke up, Ashraf Ghani fled the country. And then I was up all night that night because I had friends who were trapped in the airport trying to escape. And by the next morning, I knew I was gonna work on Afghanistan. So that's what I've been doing since August, the best I can.
Thank you so much. And you have been doing amazing work. I wanted to thank you sincerely for everything that you have helped me with my own journey post August 15. And you have done amazing work, especially for the girls of Afghanistan. I'm a big fan. I'm fangirling right now.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so why do you do it, and what made you choose this choice or make this choice? What is your cause that you are so passionate when it comes to Afghanistan?
I mean, it was a long and winding road, like I did lots of other things along the way. I started off working with homeless people in New York City. And then I worked with people in jail in New York City. And I wasn't particularly focused on women's rights. And then I I joined the United Nations for a while. I worked for the United Nations in Burundi and Central Africa, and a little bit in Bangladesh, and a little bit in the Iraq office. And then it was a very, and then I was in this program with the UN where you could, you just got assigned somewhere for your first assignment. So they sent me to Burundi, which was great. And then for your second assignment, you could ask to go to a particular place because you were already part of the system. And so I said that I wanted to go to either South Sudan or Afghanistan, because I thought that the idea of how do you create a justice system after a conflict or during a conflict was really interesting and important. And the Afghanistan office answered the email first.
Yay! Yay for us, because you have done amazing work for Afghanistan.
That's the whole story back in 2007. And
Oh, wow.
I didn't have any idea that Afghanistan would become such a big part of my life. But I think, you know, yeah, I mean, a lot of important things in my life happened to me there. And I felt really, I felt very connected to the country. And a lot of people were very kind to me, and I owe Afghanistan a lot. So
I remember I was very young. I think I was done with my high school, or almost done with my high school, and I was in Pakistan, in Quetta, and I remember you published your report on one day you will need a doctor, and it was something like that, and it was on girls' education. And that was like my first doorway when it comes to girls' education in Afghanistan, because in my head I was like, Afghanistan is all good. On Twitter, the way they used to show it, and that's the first time when it hit me, and I was educated in length on how each interview was different, but at the same time each one of them had the same causing factor when it came to education, girls' education, and access to it. So yeah, you have done amazing work when it comes to Afghanistan. Okay, 2 to 3 research findings that you have done either recently or the past 10 years that you think are very important that you would like to share with the Western world or the audience that's watching us.
Okay, well, first of all, I mean, it's a great honor for me to think that this report that I wrote helped launch you on your path. So thank you for that. I love that example of how, like, you know, our ideas feed each other, you know, and how like activists can be connected across countries, across generations, all of that now. And it's so much easier now because we have the internet and so on. 2 or 3 research findings. I mean, maybe I'll talk for a minute about that report. It's called You Won't Let Me Be a Doctor and One Day You'll Be Sick, which of course, as you know, is from a famous Afghan poem, Alande. So we borrowed that from an unnamed poet who was almost certainly a woman.
Oh yeah, definitely. I feel that. And Lunde is mostly said by, taught by women or made by women. So yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So I think, I mean, one thing that surprised even me a little bit doing that research is when I started off to go do that research, which was in 2017, I think, I thought it was going to be much more of a story about like fathers and uncles and grandfathers like resisting education and telling girls, no, you can't go to education, you can't go to school. And there was some of that, of course, but that's not what the story was. The story was much more about the fact that it's a 4-hour walk to the school. Yeah. And we've been begging for years for them to build a school here in this village, but we didn't convince them, you know, or there was money set aside, but it disappeared somewhere, or, you know, all of these stories. So that's what the story was about. The story was about, you know, we sent our oldest son to Iran so that we could afford the school fees for the youngest 3 daughters in the family, you know? So I thought that was really important because, I mean, I had this idea and I'd already spent years in Afghanistan and I had this idea that, oh, this is about misogyny, this is about sexism. Yeah. And so I learned from that, and I wanted to help other people understand from that of course there's misogyny in every country on the planet. Yeah. We didn't manage to get rid of it anywhere yet, and discrimination, but that's not what the story was about. For the most part, that story was about people wanting access to education and not having it. In terms of another one or two research findings, let me think. I mean, I guess another thing I would point to is sort of the way that activism by young people themselves has been really important on a lot of issues. So before I started working on education, I actually started doing research on child marriage.
Yeah.
And I wrote reports for Human Rights Watch on child marriage in Bangladesh and in Nepal. And something that you saw a lot of in both of those countries was activism by youth groups, like young people sort of setting up their own like groups sometimes like in their own village or in their own city and going around and like teaching people about why child marriage is harmful and actually going to the houses of like their classmates, you know, if they heard that the family was going to try to get a girl married, like going themselves and trying to convince the family and to support the girl in resisting. So I think, yeah, we also learn about how, you know, the solutions can come from young people and children themselves.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I remember from Dund, which is like a remote district in Kandahar, but it's also like one of those districts that's been developed over the course of year when it comes to agriculture or roads or anything of that sort. I remember going to this household and I'm distantly related to them. And I talked to him so he has a very big house and after getting to know each other and everything. And he's like, you know what? I have this land if you could ask the government to build us a LISA, which is like a whole high school. And we don't have it in the whole district. And I kept on thinking to myself, I was like, you know, every year there's a budget passed for these districts where a whole 12th grade school is supposed to be made, right? And I kept on thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, that's how the country is left out because nobody cares. Nobody cared about these districts at all. So I definitely agree with you on that one. I think we have touched upon this, but something that one problem that I think over the course of years, most of your work, what I have seen is more surrounding women and girls and the factors that affect them, not only when it comes to education, but violence and immigration and anything that else. So one problem, but also like a proposed solution, I would say. I know, of course, one should not fit all sort of scenario, but something that you would think is a right move towards that path, which would lead to a more better, you know, world. Yeah.
I mean, this might seem like too narrow, but I mean, one of the things that I mean, because of looking at child marriage and also looking at education and sort of moving between these two topics, I mean, one of the things that I think is so important and so missing in Afghanistan, but in lots of other countries too, is education about sexuality and about feminism and about consent, and also increasingly also about digital citizenship.
Yeah.
I did a whole report a couple of years ago on South Korea on how like online gender-based violence has become such a serious issue there, with like hidden cameras in changing room, all these things like this, you know, and it just seemed like they were teaching, this is a very rich, you know, society where everyone has a smartphone, the internet's like one of the fastest in the world, but they weren't teaching children any of the things that they need to know in school about you know, how do you behave in a responsible way in online spaces, and you know, what does consent mean, and why is it important, and what is a healthy relationship like, you know, and if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, like, you know, what does it mean to take photos without their permission? What does it mean to share photos without their permission, you know, or to ask somebody for photos? So you know, and I think that you see this also when you look at women's health. So the last time I was in Afghanistan was almost a year ago, to write, or actually a bit more than a year ago, to write a report about women's access to healthcare.
Yeah.
And I just kept interviewing women who I would ask them about, like, how many children do you have? What kind of contraception are you using? Like, how many children did you want to have? I interviewed so many people, Pashtana, so many women who they said they wanted 4 children or they wanted 5 children, but they had 12 children.
Yeah.
And this is also about education. This is about education.
Definitely.
didn't receive that they needed for being able to control their own lives and make their own decisions.
I definitely agree with you. We have this one doctor in Kandar, and the first thing so when we started this program for maternal healthcare, the first thing when I was talking to her, she just shut me right down. She's like, no, listen to me. It's like, and more education on how to have a family planning and everything. She's like, listen to me. You cannot just tell them to plan, we're not in that phase. We have to help them. They need it, and they need it more than we have to, first educate them and then everything. She's like, they need it, and you need to give them that support. And that's where I realized, I was like, how much urgent the need is and how much we tend to ignore it, because we are like, oh, we are a different society and everything. But at the end of the day, it's like the women that we not only rob in Korea when it comes to digital consent, but also in Afghanistan from her own blood and bones, because giving birth to a child is not a normal thing. It's literally your own flesh and bones. And that's something that we need to focus more on. Okay, last question. And this, I think I love this one. Any suggestions for girls or women or anyone in general who would want to follow a career path like yours? Anything that you think is like 2 to 3 main things that they need to do or should be doing right now as they are in college or graduating, in order to make sure that they enter the world of like human rights activism, research, and anything of that sort? Yeah.
Oh, wow. So I don't know, I would say you can't expect to have a plan necessarily. Like the plans that you make will never work out. I guess you've experienced this in the last year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, one thing I didn't say when I introduced myself is I'm a high school dropout. I dropped out of.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about it.
Yeah. So I don't think, I would have predicted that I would be a lawyer and work for Human Rights Watch someday. And so I guess one thing I would say to young people is, if you have some setback, if everything goes wrong, if you have to flee your country, even, which hopefully won't happen, but you have the strength and the vision to kind of start yourself over again, and everything that you learn from that experience will be valuable in the work that you want to do if you want to work on human rights, because it'll make you more empathetic, it'll make you better able to understand difficulties that other people are going through, even if they're quite different from the difficulties that you've had yourself, and do the thing that you're most passionate about. And that might change over time, like I didn't work on women's rights until really like 8 years ago. The earlier part of my career was about prisoners, was about justice, all of that kind of stuff. And girls' education, I came to very organically, because, I was in Afghanistan and looking around and trying to understand, like, what are the solutions? What are the problems? What are the solutions that could really make the biggest difference in the lives of women and girls here? And you can't escape education when you start to ask that question in not just Afghanistan, but a lot of countries. So follow your passion and keep asking yourself new questions.
Oh, that's an amazing note to end on. I just wanted to add this thing. So I went out with a colleague, and she was telling me about these new Afghans who have resettled near Wellesley, and she was telling me how this girl, whenever she goes to teach them English, she's the last one to come or eat or sit at the table, And I kept on thinking to myself, I couldn't explain it to her more easily, but then at the same time, I had to shed the light on the fact that there's part of our culture that we tend to ignore, or part of our society that we tend to ignore and glorify everything good in ourselves and back home. And I just told her, right, I was like, here's the thing. In Afghanistan, girls are always chosen last to not only eat, but also last to learn. And that factors in everything: healthcare, education, traveling, and everything, especially right now. So I'm very grateful to your work, the factors that you shed light on, and make sure that you highlight them. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for making the time to do this. Yeah.